Welcome to Gardening with Miss Kari. Let's begin with our movements. Everybody stand up. And first we're going to reach for our toes and be seeds. And then we're going to grow above the soil to become sprouts. And then we're going to reach for the sun, reach for the light to become plants. So today we're going to continue our conversation about how plants need light. Remember our acronym L.A.W.N that describes the primary things that plants need, including light, air, water, and nutrients. And for our sign language word for the day, I want you to think of another word that starts with the letter L that reminds you of light, maybe how the plants feel when the sun is shining down on them. Miss Kari likes to sit in her south-facing window that gets lots of light and read a book, and I can feel the warmth of the sun. You'll see cats sunning themselves to soak up those sunlights. It feels nice and warm. I'm sure you have too. And sometimes that reminds me of love. So that is our sign for today, love. To do that, you just make some gentle fists. These are fists of love, and you make a cross on your body, and that's the American sign for love. So if you see your family member or a friend, give them a little love, send a little love their way. So to continue our talk about light, I want to begin with direct and indirect sunlight. You'll see that whenever you buy a new plant, it's important to think about where you're going to place it, either inside your home or in the outside. And part of thinking about what's the best fit for your plant is knowing the needs of your plants. And that usually comes on that little tab that comes along with plants. And the main thing it'll say is how much light it needs. It'll say if it needs a lot of light, a little bit of light, if it needs direct light. So Miss Kari's standing outside directly under the sun. So I'm getting direct sunlight. And other plants will say indirect. And when they say that, it means that the sun, they still need light, but they don't need as much light, and they don't want the sun shining directly on them. And that's typically the plants that like those north-facing windows that don't get as much light. They typically don't get direct light. They get indirect light. Or the plants you will put inside of your home, further away from the windows, or those plants that are like under really big trees. Those are plants that like indirect light. And indirect light, so if I were to step inside the school here, I would be in indirect light because I'm inside the school and the sun isn't shining directly on me. There's a roof over my head or a bunch of tree branches or something blocking direct light. I still get light. If you guys remember, when you stand in the doorways, you will still get light. It's just not direct light, it's indirect light. The other thing about light is, I talked about it a little bit the last time, is plants need different amounts of light. And if you think about how our earth works, I have a globe here, and this is the North Pole, and at the bottom is the South Pole. And I'm sure you guys have heard that when it is summer in the northern hemisphere, everything that's above the equator, this is the equator, the middle of the earth, everything that's above the equator is in the northern hemisphere. And that's where we're at. We're in the northern hemisphere and it's called North America. And because the earth points away from from the sun during the winter and fall months, the sun isn't able to shine directly on those points because they're pointing away. The bottom part, as you can see, South America, or everything below the equator, gets more of that direct sun. So the top during winter and fall is getting indirect because it's kind of pointed away. And the bottom is getting more direct sun. So when it is winter in the northern hemisphere of the world, it is actually summer in the southern hemisphere because it's getting more of that direct light. And when it gets that direct light, it's getting also more light for longer hours. And we talked about how plants that grow fruits and vegetables, all your flowering plants, need longer amounts of light. So it's not just a couple hours, it's usually a minimum of 12 hours, sometimes even more. So they're going to thrive more in the spring and summer where they're getting longer days and more light. And the longer the sun is shining on that part of the world, like in the spring and summer, the hotter, the warmer it gets as the day progresses. But in the winter and fall, when it's not, the sun isn't shining on the earth as long, you not only have it get dark earlier, but it doesn't get as warm because it doesn't have the sun warming it for as long before it gets dark. Kind of cool. So I have my sun here, and we know that the earth, because this is the sun's way bigger than the earth, right? So the earth would be more like a little teeny thing, even smaller than this, going around the sun, and as it goes around, the direction that the North Pole points what makes it so either it is pointing away, like right now during the fall and winter, it's starting to point away from the sun, and as it comes around, see how the North Pole is now pointing towards the sun, getting more direct light, and then the bottom, the southern hemisphere, is getting that indirect, it's getting less light or not as long because it's pointing away. Cool. So for what I want you to do, your think about it activity is next time we're going to talk about how the plants need, what's our next thing? Air. So we've talked a lot about light. Our next video is going to talk about how plants need air. I want you to think about this. So your eco challenge is to think about how plants need air. Now I'm going to give you a couple of hints. So here we're looking at a plant. It's the milkweed plant that our monarch butterflies that live here in Pacific Grove love. And if you notice, they've gone to seed. The flower, you can see the orange flowers here, have been pollinated by our insects and our birds, and they have gone to seed, and you can see the seeds here. Now think about how the air is going to affect these seeds. You can sort of see it blowing in the wind right now. You can see that it's blowing. And if I were to let go, then the wind or the air is going to carry it away. So there's one of your hints for how air affects plants and how plants need air. But plants need air in a variety of ways. We're going to talk about several of those ways. But there's your hint for your eco challenge. So you walk around the neighborhood, look for other examples of how a lot of plants now have gone to seed and how air is affecting those seeds, and think about some of the other ways that plants need air. So to end our time together, we're going to do our tree pose to end. Lift up my branches, I'm going to create my trunk, and I'm going to wave my branches, my leaves goodbye. Goodbye, Eco Explorers.